Today, we're diving into something truly fascinating, the Bengal Renaissance. Now, this wasn't just some local cultural movement in the 19th century. Oh no, this was an explosion of ideas that didn't just reshape a region, it literally planted the seeds for the India we know today.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at why Bengal needed a rebirth in the first place. Then, we'll meet two clashing visions for change, one from the reformer Ram Mohan Roy and the other from the fiery radicals of young Bengal. We'll also ask a tough question: how deep did this revolution actually go? And finally, we'll unpack the incredible legacy it left behind.
To really get a sense of how huge this was, check out this quote from the historian Jadunath Sarkar. He called 19th century Bengal the Athens of India. I mean, that tells you everything, right? This wasn't just some local affair, it was the intellectual engine for the entire subcontinent.
So what do we even mean by Renaissance? Well, the word is French, and it just means rebirth. Think of it as a time when art, science, and learning come roaring back after a period of stagnation. And believe me, by the early 1800s, Bengali society was in desperate need of exactly that.
So, what was going on in Bengal that made this rebirth so critical? Let's take a closer look at the social crisis that really set the stage for this incredible moment of change. By the early 19th century, Bengali Hindu society felt, well, completely stuck. You had a rigid caste system that dictated every single part of your life. Women were shut out from getting an education, from owning property, and so many parts of daily life were controlled by these deeply ingrained and often really cruel superstitious rituals.
And one practice stands out for its absolute brutality: sati. This was the forced burning of a widow on her husband's funeral pyre. It's just horrifying to think about. This single custom became a lightning rod for a new generation of thinkers, and it really galvanized them into a movement for radical social reform.
And the first major figure to stand up and challenge all of this was Raja Ram Mohan Roy. He's often called the pioneer of the Bengal Renaissance, a man who tried to steer a course between respecting tradition and embracing modernity.
Roy was just relentless. He wasn't a one-issue guy, he launched a full-scale assault on all of society's problems. He led the public charge to get sati abolished, he championed women's rights, he argued for a more rational monotheistic version of Hinduism, and he fought for a free press. His whole goal was to purify and reform society from the inside out.
But Roy's moderate, reformist path, it wasn't the only game in town. At the very same time, a much more explosive, more confrontational movement was brewing inside the classrooms of Hindu college, all centered around a charismatic young teacher named Henry de Rosio.
And here you can really see the central conflict of the whole Renaissance. On one side, you've got Roy, the reformer, trying to fix the system from within by going back to ancient texts. But on the other side, you have de Rosio's radicals. They were all about Western rationalism, and they didn't want to fix the old system, they wanted to tear it down completely.
De Rosio's defiant attitude just comes screaming through in this quote from his resignation letter. You see, he was accused of corrupting the youth, of turning them against Hinduism, and he fired right back, basically calling out the hypocrisy of the very establishment that was trying to shut him up.
And his followers, who came to be known as Young Bengal, they absolutely took his teachings to heart. I mean, they questioned everything: religious dogma, colonial rule, you name it. They started debate clubs to talk about philosophy and openly defied social taboos, like eating beef as a symbolic act of rebellion. They were basically the intellectual shock troops of the Renaissance.
Okay, so we've got these two powerful streams of change flowing, but just how far did this revolution actually spread? Now it's time to take a hard look at the movement's very real limitations.
This reveals one of the Renaissance's biggest weaknesses. For all its intellectual firepower, it was overwhelmingly an elite movement. It was driven by the Bhadralok, which basically means the gentlefolk, the educated, upper-class Hindus. And their amazing ideas, they rarely ever reached the vast majority of the population.
So here's the crucial point. This awakening had two major blind spots. First, its ideas almost never trickled down to the farmers in the countryside or the working classes. And second, it was almost entirely a Hindu affair, which meant Bengal's huge Muslim community was, for the most part, left on the sidelines.
This sharp observation from a later reformer, Swami Vivekananda, really hammers the point home. He basically argued that without a real mass awakening through education, even a massive victory like getting sati abolished was, in the grand scheme of things, just a microscopic phenomenon.
But, and this is important, despite those limitations, we absolutely cannot understate the movement's legacy. The ideas that were being fiercely debated in 19th century Calcutta would go on to shape the destiny of the entire nation.
So, what's the bottom line? The Bengal Renaissance was this powerful, elite-led answer to a society in deep crisis. It was pulled between these two forces of reform and radicalism, and even though its direct impact was pretty narrow, it lit an intellectual fire that would eventually fuel everything from women's emancipation to India's fight for independence.
Of course, the story doesn't stop here. You can trace this legacy through later figures who picked up the torch, you can explore the parallel awakening that happened within the Muslim community, and you can see how these very ideas fueled India's freedom struggle. Which leaves us with one final thought to chew on. For a movement that was so limited in its reach, what do you think was its single most important long-term consequence?